The transformations of graphs is all about understanding that we're basically changing either the x values or the y values in a graph. So first job you always have to do is do a table of values for a particular graph you're interested in. So we look at x squared, we can just look at a very simple set of values, 0, 1 and 2. So y is going to be 0, 1 and 4. Then we've got to understand how we alter the table of values. And then what you do is you alter your table of values, plot your graph. Very simple. Then altering the y values is very simple because anything to alter the y values is outside of the fx. It's outside of the brackets. So here we add 2. All we do is add 2 to every y value. And this is basically a translation where we move the whole graph up 2. Similarly, fx minus 2 tells us to subtract 2 from all the y values. So this is a translation, 2 down. Here we have 2fx. This is telling us to multiply all the y values by 2. And what this is, we call it a stretch, because basically it's pulling all the values either up or down. And so it's a stretch in the y direction. If we have minus fx, we times all of the values by minus 1. So anything that's above the y equals 0 line will then end up exactly the same distance below. So this is a reflection in the x-axis. When we look at altering the x values, the coding is slightly bizarre. There's a slight logic to it, but it's actually the opposite of what we'd expect. This is telling us to actually take 2 off all of our x values. And the y values stay exactly the same. And this is effectively a translation in the x direction of minus 2. So in other words, it's going left. Similarly, if we have f in the brackets x minus 2, this is telling us to add 2 to all of our x values. So add 2 to all the values, then off we go. F of minus x, this is the only one that vaguely does what you'd expect because it makes all the x values negative. But how we do it is actually dividing all the x values by minus 1. And this is a reflection in the y-axis. Then if we have a look at some of the questions on mymaths, if we look at the worksheet, first one's a little bit tricky. Our function is the x squared function. But what we're going to do is we're going to do f of minus 3, and then that's in the brackets, minus 14. Now we look at the bit in the brackets, that's what that's telling us to do, is to translate the whole thing 3 units to the right. Minus 14 is telling us to actually move the whole graph down 14. And to find that in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, what we do is we do brackets x minus 3 squared minus 14. We expand that out, simplify it, and that will give us x squared minus 6x minus 5. So then dragging the curve into the correct position is actually relatively quite simple because all we've got to do is drag it 3 to the right and then 14 down. Next question, we've got a graph. The red one is the A graph, and then we have to describe the translation, the fx, which will describe the transformation that's occurred. If we look at b, that's just been reflected in the x-axis, and that is minus fx, because all the y values have gone negative. X values stayed the same. If we look at c, the x values have stayed exactly the same, but the y values have got 4 times as big, so that's why it's 4fx. If we look at d, the y values haven't changed here. All that's happened is the x values have changed by +3. But of course we then use the notation fx, brackets x minus 3, close brackets, to describe this. This is actually, the next one, quite a common question at GCSE, where you've got a curve, you've got a point on it, and it's what happens to that point after the transformation. First one's easy, we're altering the y value, +5. So we just add 5 to the y value. The next one, we're going to take 3 off the x value. And the one after that, we're going to divide the x value by 4. So in the last two, the y value stays the same, we alter the x. In the first one, the x value stays the same, we alter the y. Finally, we'll look at what happens to a curve under various transformations. X squared is our actual curve, and that's on the right hand side. If we look at the one to the left of that, is x squared plus 2. The plus 2 is just telling us to add 2 to all the y values, so up it goes. On the next one, it's brackets x plus 2, and what that is telling us to do is move it left. So effectively, you're taking 2 off all the x values. So the bottom of the curve there will be at -2. Next one is x minus 2 squared. That's actually telling us to add 2 to all the x values. So the bottom of the curve is going to be at 2, 0. Have a go at this exercise yourself, and if you get stuck, replay the video.